limits are what boundary is, the separation between where I end and you, the world around me, begins. Boundaries, just like parenting, your very wise statement, we don't come knowing what they are, knowing where our boundary is, knowing how to parent. That's something that's learned.
Welcome to Raw with Jay, the support we needed but never received.
Wow, do we have an epic guest for you today? It is somebody that has been so inspirational on my journey. And you know those moments where you are feeling so dysregulated, you're feeling really disempowered, and you just don't know what to do. And this beautiful woman has come in and said the most perfect things at the most perfect time, and it's really helped me on my journey. I'm going to start with a little quote. The most unseen privilege in life is a supportive family. Whoa, that in itself is a massive mic drop. And I heard that and I was like, oh, does that get me in the feels? Dr. Nicole LePera, welcome to Raw with Jay. We are so excited that you are here with us. You have your new book that's just come out called Reparenting the Inner Child. And it has been, the most inspirational book. It has really helped me in so many different ways. You've got numerous books, but this is your latest one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of the work that you do. You have millions of people all around the world that just listen in and you've just been really supportive in moments of dysregulation for myself. And you've just been this little like birdie on my shoulder at times, so many times of, oh yes, Dr. Nicole LePera said this. So thank you for being here. Now, I want to start with your journey because I think that the why of where people have got to where they are is so incredibly important. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and why you have come as a clinical psychologist, why that you do the work that you do? Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you for your supportive words, for having me. It is really such an honor to be here. My journey began, as all of ours does, in a childhood. For me, it was a very confusing childhood because, as far as I was concerned, I had it good. I had two parents around me who were very supportive of me, excelling in the traditional ways, giving me opportunities academically, athletically, so that I could be a secure adult. And I came to realize that what I had lacked is I didn't have, again, while I had the support of my parents in a lot of ways because of their own childhood experiences, I did not have their emotional attunement and their emotional support. So, to cope with that, as we will all do as very adaptive little creatures in childhood, I sought to the instinctual desire to be a psychologist was born as I sought so desperately to try to understand other people, what made people be who they are, show up as they did. And so before long, whenever you're asked, what is it you're going to be when you want to grow up? I would have started to say, oh, I want to be a psychologist. I want to understand people and help people understand themselves better. And so I marched through school. I did so very successfully. I got a clinical psychology PhD. I opened up a private practice. I had a very successful practice and relationship. Yet several years in, I started to feel really disempowered because what I started to hear and feel in my own life and hear reported by clients was how stuck we all felt. It didn't seem that no matter how much insight, no matter how much awareness, that we continue to repeat patterns, dysfunctional patterns, be identities that weren't serving us. So I really dove into a rabbit hole trying to understand what it was that I was missing. And thankfully, on the internet is where a lot of information comes. I learned a lot about the body, the role the nervous system plays, the role our early childhood plays in creating adaptations that are so beautiful for early environments designed to help us stay connected, to help us stay safe, but to often end up being dysfunctional patterns that we repeat in adulthood. So now I put out my fourth book, which is really aimed in exploring and understanding those early childhood experiences. Again, the way I coped was to channel all of that emotional overwhelm into doing, achieving, understanding the world around me. Yet I continued to lack the ability to feel safe in my own body. And of course, this new book, all of my work is aimed at giving people the insight and awareness, but also the tools to create the change that they deserve.
I'm an overachiever for that exact reason. I've listened to so many of your podcasts and read so many of your books, and that just resonates so deeply is that yeah, I do work because I have an element of lack of self-belief. If I'm not working, I'm not loved, all of those beautiful things that we learn. Now, I do want to talk about the inner child. Now, I have 36 aunties and uncles and 100 family members, and I think that I want to speak to many of them. They don't understand what this work is. They don't understand what is the inner child. So can you answer that question? What is the inner child and how do we do the inner work?
I appreciate this question because I think when I'm not by far the first person to ever speak of this concept. I think it's dated back to Carl Jung, who first started to speak of this inner child aspect of ourself. And for a very long time, I myself didn't understand what it was. It didn't seem practical or tangible to me. And I've come to understand that the inner child is a part of us, again, formed earliest in life, in our earliest environments, in our earliest relationships, that learned how to survive, how to handle unpredictability, conflict, unmet needs, and how to connect with the people around us. This happened before we had logic, understanding, maturity, reasoning, when we only had sensations, emotions, and survival driven responses. So, this part, even if some of us are well past our childhood in age, we're living in different geographical locations, we have different relationships around us, it comes alive in those moments where our reactions are disproportionate to the moment. We're overreacting. We're saying, doing things that we don't mean. We're underreacting. We're not speaking up or creating a boundary that when we needed it, or we're just repeating identities, roles. You and me, right? Sounds like we relate on being an overachiever. Listeners might be a caregiver, right? The things that at one time kept us safely connected that our body still relies on, because even though our circumstances have changed, our body remembers and repeats those earliest habits because they secured us protection, connection, or outright survival.
Can you give as an example of that? Like, what would be an example of how your inner child has played out in your adult life?
So for me, I'll speak from my experience first. In childhood, again, I had two very present parents, and my mom in particular, who was very emotionally shut down because she herself was emotionally overwhelmed. She was especially present and attuned and validating of me when I was excelling, whether it was academically or athletically. Again, coming from a very traditional mindset that those two things in most of our societies, my parents believed, would lead to financial security, to success, to me, quote unquote, having a good life. So those moments, right, where I saw very clearly, it's not even just direct things that are said. Oftentimes it's indirect moments where mom is there in celebration of the A and not so proud or moving away when you don't get the perfect score, led to me in adulthood overworking, right? Being a perfectionist, extending myself beyond my limits, trying so desperately to avoid even the mildest criticism. Another really common ones, if in childhood, right, life was so overwhelming, it was chaotic, there was a lot of emotional reactivity, maybe even abuse. For some of us, the safest thing we could do is shut down, is disconnect from ourselves, is live in a fantasy world or suppress all of our emotions. Then that turns into an adult who feels emotionally numb, disconnected from ourselves, from our relationships, or someone who pulls away even in moments where someone is interested in being close to us or wants to help support us. This looks like, again, shutting down and to prevent conflict in moments of disagreement where we need to speak up. And then a final really common one I just want to end with is hypervigilance. If in childhood life was so unpredictable, right, where we had to cue in to any shift or change in mood and tone because maybe on the other side of that change was an abusive behavior, a shaming behavior, or a disconnecting behavior, that unpredictability and hypervigilance was so protective then. But now over time, it turns into social anxiety. It turns into overthinking every interaction, right? Over analyzing every text that we sent that didn't get an immediate response, or feeling responsible for everyone else's mood to the point where we're swooping in to solve their problems. Again, the important takeaway, at one time, right? Excelling to earn praise earned us connection. Being hypervigilant kept us safe. Shutting down reduced overwhelm. But now, again, our body continues to rely on those patterns, thinking it's still keeping us safe, but now it's mismatched for our current environment or the way we currently want to show up.
I listened to your podcast with Sabrina Zohar. Big shout out to her. We love her. And there was so many different elements in how it is in our childhood. It shows up in our romantic relationships and the avoidant. And there's just so many different things that come back to us. Can you talk about somebody like an avoidant? Like, where does that come from? If you're in a relationship with somebody that's avoidant, why are we attracted to those particular elements?
So all of the attachment styles, again, as far as I'm concerned, are born out of these early, beautiful, needed adaptations. Because as children, we're born developmentally dependent. We need someone to care for us, not only physiologically, we now know in terms of our nervous system, we cannot soothe ourselves on our own. We need someone to not only provide physical care, we need someone to provide emotional support and nurturance and connection when we feel unsafe. So as a very adaptive little creature, right, we are tuning into those direct or indirect cues, and we are adapting quite literally the way our body is functioning and showing up based on one question and observation, so to speak, which is when I reach for comfort or connection, when I'm having a need and I need someone else to show up to meet that need, what happens? Right, and so if I've the very few of us, because 'cause I've yet to meet too many people who have a completely secure attachment style, again, because of different information. I mean, the science and field has changed so much. A lot of our parents didn't have their own needs met, didn't have access to the resources externally or internally to create the safety that we needed. Though if we did, and care was consistently the person was physically present, emotionally available, calm themselves, then we create a secure attachment, right? We learn that closeness, connection, us, someone else, and the world around us is safe. If that doesn't happen, right, and care was inconsistent or overwhelming, now our body learns something completely different, right? So if there was a lot of overwhelming emotions in the family to focus on avoidant, because I do think avoidance sometimes gets a really bad rap. Avoidance is a protection from overwhelming emotions. If we didn't have someone to show up in support of us when we were dealing with just natural stress of life, or if the person, our caregiver, was the one overwhelming us with emotional overreactivity or abusive behaviors or shaming behaviors, the safest thing our body can do is to pull away from connection, to shut down the overwhelming feelings that are happening in our body, and then again, to continue to repeat that attachment pattern in all of our relationships. And so, as many of us will learn, right, we seek that which is familiar. We become so comfortable, right, staying disconnected from our emotions. And maybe that was in relation with our core caregiver who was overwhelming and anxiously attached. And now we find ourselves continuing to repeat those dynamics in our adult relationships. But again, the important takeaway here is attachment patterns, right, are perfect adaptations to the earliest environments. Our nervous system will always seek the familiar, whether it's the way we feel ourselves being so shut down and numb because emotions are too overwhelming, and how then we relate to others. And that's why we continue to cycle through these patterns in all of our relationships across time.
That is massive. Thank you for saying that. I'm sure that is really new for so many people that are listening, and it's such incredible information. Like, I've grown up in a family where I'm the black sheep. I'm the black sheep of the family. I think very differently to other people. I've always been told everything's wrong with me, and that's continued on, whether it's friends or family. People love to tell me what's wrong with me all the time. There's nothing wrong with me. I just think differently to you. I'm a beautiful human being who just thinks very differently to other people. And I've learned to accept and love and embrace every part of myself. That's our inner child work. But it's been a really hard journey. I've had a dad that used to work and didn't really show up. And I've had to learn to love every part of him. And there's something on your Instagram that you said about you've got to look at our parents as well like children. They're just learning. And I think that was the part for me that really helped me move through those elements. There was a time in my life when I separated. It was a very brutal separation. It was not easy. It still isn't, actually. And I had to move away from my family because I was like, I'm 40 years old. Just let me grow up. Like, stop controlling every element. Let me be. And that was really hard for me to do. But I think that that's a time where families can be enmeshed. And I've had an experience with a very enmeshed family. What is an enmeshed family?
I'm shaking my head so wholeheartedly because I too have discovered what enmeshment is and even what a boundary is. This wasn't something, again, as many years of training, I never really heard, learned about, or would apply to myself that concept of a boundary or a
What is
point
a
of
boundary? Can we say what a boundary is? Because I think
100%.
people think that they're very different to what they actually are.
100%. I'll talk about what it is and then the application, because I think the application
Mm.
is maybe where we get a little bit confused. What it is a point of separation, a limit. right? A physical boundary, and we all differ in terms of how comfortable we are with physical closeness. Some of us are really comfortable being really close to people, and some of us want a little more of physical space to feel safe and comfortable and secure in our skin. There's limits are what boundary is, the separation between where I end and you, the world around me, begins. Boundaries, just like parenting, your very wise statement, we don't come knowing what they are, knowing where our boundary is, knowing how to parent. That's something that's learned. And it's learned predominantly through what is modeled, right? So if our parents themselves didn't have someone to show up and care of their own needs or teach them what a boundary or a limit was or how to advocate and set and maintain a boundary when they needed it, chances are they might not know fully how to, they might have very well intentions, but they might not know how to show up in service of meeting our needs, how to teach us to meet our own needs, or how to honor and respect our limits so that we can then honor and respect our own limits. So that's what a boundary is, a limit, a point of space, separation between me and you, really simply speaking. I think
So
the
the
confusion
boundaries for us or the boundaries for them?
so the confusion I think happens, right, when we apply because technically speaking, the boundaries for us. What do I need to create a
Yes.
safe bubble, so to speak, right around me, where I can feel safe in my body, at ease, safe in my mind. I know what my thoughts are. I don't feel pressured to speak if I'm not comfortable. I can share them in a way that can be understood by you. Same thing with emotions. Where I think it gets blurred is the application of a boundary, is an acknowledging that it's for me. A lot of people deliver boundaries as ultimatums, consequences for you, right? Assuming, right, that I need something different to change on in this relationship, right? I will think a boundary is by saying, and I'm gonna simplify this, "Stop doing this," or "I will."
Mm,
Right? So if, say, for instance, someone calls you often all hours of the day with stressful, exciting, whatever content it is, and you've discovered I need a boundary, right? I need to not be, and we have an age of urgency, of interconnectedness where someone can ping you at any time. You discover, right? And this is what I discovered in my boundaryless household where we did call each other at all the times, usually to report something catastrophic that was happening, whether it was big or little. We wanted everyone in the family to know. We felt like they needed to know urgently. And so I discovered that was very disruptive because it was very stressful, and sometimes the things I was being called for weren't that big of a deal, so to speak, and I had a lot of stress happening in my own life that I needed to tend to. So instead of delivering what is not a boundary by saying, "Stop calling me at all hours," what a boundary would look like in this simple example is assuming that you're not gonna stop, because I think one of the things of growing older we all have to settle into is we can't control people around us, even if we want to. We can't stop someone from calling us. What we can do, though, is not call them back, not answer the phone, not be on the receiving end or immediately respond to them. So what a boundary could look like, and I may or may not be speaking from exact personal experience, when I discovered that we had no boundaries in my family, especially on the phone, what I did was I turned off all of the alerts on my phone, assuming that they will still ping me, text me, call me at all hours in their felt sense of urgency, but I gave myself so they're not changing. My boundary, though, was I need a minute, right? I need a minute to either see what you're telling me and give me a second to decide if I can or want to respond in that moment, so you can keep calling or texting. But by turning off the alerts on my phone, I set a boundary where now I created space. I have to commit myself to the boundary and not just call them back because I discovered that they pinged me, right? And take the time and space I need. So that's simple example, but a boundary that you can apply in every area. They're not demanding someone do, stop doing, do more of, do less of. They're we deciding what do I need to change and how can I show up differently to ensure this change happens.
So, just to confirm, a boundary keeps us safe. It's not necessarily to shut people out. However, boundaries, especially in my life, are often received as abandonment. You're abandoning me. I had a situation with a friend once and I was going through a really hard time, just separated. She'd separated too. And she's like, "You cut us off." And I said, "What I need is love and nurturing right now. And I don't feel like you have the capacity to give it to me. Spray." It was spray. And I'm like, I very clearly told her my boundary and I just had to remove myself from that situation. Now, I'm not the type of person that will go around and tell everyone about everything. I keep it to myself. I move on and I just get on with my life. That's just what I've learned that I have to do. Unfortunately, there's some people in my life that I do have to create boundaries for. But every time I create a boundary, it is met with me being attacked. Why is that? What's the science behind that? And as humans, how can we possibly allow other people to realize that we're just trying to keep ourselves safe?
So I think starting with the surface of what's happening in those moments, we have become predictable. Our
Mm.
responses, our availability, our lack of availability, our dynamics, right? And if we just think about the longevity of some of these relationships where we wake up to the fact that the way it was isn't working and we want to show up differently, be a little less available in those moments, take care of ourselves as opposed to maybe caregiving and just being there selflessly, right, for someone else before our own self, understanding that until I pour in my cup, I can't really support you the way I want to.
Mm.
At surface, what we're doing is we're violating the expectation that we have repeated over, for some of us, a lifetime. And now we're entering the world of our nervous system, who loves the predictable familiar, right? It loves to know what comes next, especially in relationships. So the moment, even if you're doing something healthy for yourself that makes total logical sense for you, before the person can even settle into even hear your perspective of why you might be doing it, their nervous system is now activated. They're on alert, right? Because what they predicted, you saying yes, you being there, whatever it is, you taking care of them before yourself, is not happening, right? So now they are activated in a sense because we don't like the uncertainty. We don't like to wonder, why is this person doing this and what's going to come next? And right, this is when we get told, you're different, you're changed. What's happening now? Who's gotten into you? Who are you listening to
Absolutely.
on the internet? Me. At surface, we violated expectation that's going to challenge anyone's nervous system. To complicate it, if the person on the receiving end of the new limit or violated expectation is someone who has learned, being we're having a conversation about boundaries to some extent, right? Distance, separation, not being available. If they have learned that separation, distance, silence equals rejection and abandonment, again, something they might have learned in their own childhood, now that simple reaction of stress that naturally comes when an expectation is violated is going to be compounded, right? Because now they're going to feel in their body rejected, abandoned, maybe like they've done something wrong and looking for maybe the person to blame. You've changed, or someone gotten into you and made you change. Not again, their body and reaction is speaking from a dysregulated place before maybe in time their body can calm down and then maybe you can have a conversation and logically explain to them and maybe they can shift their perspective outward from the impact of the boundary on them to your reason and perspective of why. But again, not all of the time is that the case. And I think that brings us to a difficulty that a lot of us feel in our closest relationships is we're changing, right? This is helping us. We're doing something that's
Constantly.
challenging, that's uncomfortable, but we
Oh,
know it's for our best interest. Maybe it's even for the best interest of this relationship, and yet we're feeling that kickback, or maybe even being shamed, or maybe then the person is turning their back on us completely because they're so hurt with abandonment.
oh, that hits me so deeply because this has been a constant pattern in my life. I'm the nurturer. I'm the one that makes people feel good. I love human beings. I am a connector, but I also need a lot of space. And sometimes I go through some things. I had somebody else once say to me, "You're a counselor for kids. You should know better." And it's like, well, no, I'm a human being who's learning. I'm constantly evolving. I'm not the same person I was last week, never mind 10 years ago. And people don't like that evolution. They don't want me to evolve. They just want me to be the same person that is the people pleaser that will make you feel good and that will run away from me when I need to feel good. You know, when I separated, hundreds of people just walked away because I was too much. Meanwhile, I'm the person that holds space for them. And I found that really challenging. The
Yeah.
next couple of pieces that I want to talk about is a smear campaign. What is a smear campaign? Because I've experienced this many times now. What is a smear campaign and why would somebody have the need to activate a smear campaign against somebody?
Very interesting that this is coming up right now as I have a virtual membership self-healer circle. And next month, we're going to be covering the topic of covert narcissist dynamics
Oof.
because often a spear campaign is associated with just that. So, simply speaking, starting with a smear campaign is when someone, right, is sharing their perspective of us or of an experience or of a narrative of something that happened that has an intention that's maybe not necessarily connected in reality. And I really want to though emphasize here no two people are ever going to agree on an objective reality because reality isn't objective. It's subjective. Like you were even saying, I'm a unique individual. I'm me, right? I'm different than my family in this way. And everyone's going to have a different perspective or experience of what happened. Though a lot of times, right? If and when a person struggles, as is the case with a covert narcissist, so quickly what that is, I believe that's a developmental, when we didn't have the safety and security to develop a sense of self in childhood. It's a little different than I think the traditional narcissism, which I think kind of inaccurately is represented as someone being so pompous and self grandiose and self involved. I actually view narcissism as living on a spectrum, and I believe it to be a protective mechanism. Because what will always happen when we feel threatened is our perspective will shrink, right? When we are threatened, whether it's physically threatened or emotionally threatened, it is hard, even if it's our most dear loved one or even our child, our perspective shrinks to ourself because it's evolutionarily valuable, right? We can't care about the other people around us in a moment where there's a bear chasing us. We shrink our perspective, literally, our eyes turn inward, our perspective turn inward, and we become self focused. So I see narcissism as existing on a spectrum where we are existing more consistently than not, right, when we are on the narcissistic end in that self-focused state. I believe it's an attempt, right, at survival, at maintaining a semblance, an idea of who we are. And so covert narcissism doesn't look as grandiose as outward. It often doesn't even look like as someone is being feeling like they're so great or better than, but it's all of these subtle dynamics which often involve a sense of coercive control where our reality, should we share it with someone who's a covert narcissist, is being gaslit, being denied, right? This person isn't taking accountability for something very real that we're sharing that they've hurt us around. And they're controlling essentially the narrative of who they believe themselves to be based on denying your reality, changing the facts of the reality. And then a spear campaign is the outward projection of that, where to save, right, their idea of who they might be as this good, compassionate, loving, whatever person who was wronged, they begin to share then that version of reality, often with other people, right? They might tell their friends how terrible and horrible you are, not taking any accountability, maybe for the role that they played in the conflict, the disconnection, the disagreement, or even your reaction to their behavior. It becomes all about how they were the victim. Oftentimes, again, I do believe it can be a little bit of a delusion, meaning like a lost touch of reality, again, from this self focus. And then it can spread outward, whether, again, it's to friends. Now that we have a social media world, it can happen on social media. Even more problematically, it can trickle into kind of the legal system and police system where narratives can be spread in a way to protect and preserve someone's sense of self through their version of what happened. And again, I believe it's a self protection that is grounded in the inability to hold space for another reality, to take accountability for oneself and one's actions, to hear feedback about how one is being experienced by another person. And because they don't have that healthy sense of who they are, even in a difficult moment, their best protection is to project outward to someone else and make them the person who is wronging and them the victim.
So, just to be clear here, a smear campaign is because they're trying to protect themselves, not because their information is correct. Because I
I
find that a lot of people believe what people say. And I just think you've got to stay in your own lane and be your own person.
I think that, yeah, it's often coming from a self-protection. I do believe to some extent people who are engaging with their version of events, especially when it's very drastically different from ours, to some extent, why I said it's like a delusion, so to speak, I believe they truly believe it. I believe they are so protected against the feeling bad, the guilt, that they're not even able to take accountability and responsibility and allow your version of reality or your hurt into the picture. So I think to some extent it is so believable to other people. Like I do agree. I do think that other people, it's very compelling the way it's told. It's even maybe there's context of the stories left out, and maybe there is a piece of evidence of the reaction. And now look, you are yelling and screaming, but you left out all of the abuse that happened behind the scenes that led to the very natural
Yes.
reaction of you defending yourself, right? So it can be curated in a way, but I truly believe from having my own experience with it that the person does believe what they're telling to some extent, which is why it's so crafted in a very believable way. And
Mm.
yeah, again, without context, without connection with the person who you're hearing the story about, maybe with your own projection, maybe touching your own wounding where what you're hearing happened to this person happened to you. And now you project wrongness and badness onto the person who you're being told is the perpetrator. It can be very confusing and very dysregulating, of course, I think, for everyone involved because it is a losing touch of the whole story or of the reality, or at least the reality that included the other person.
I've had a time in my life, and I'm very careful about what I say here, where I just had to leave and just hide. It's a trauma response. I'm well aware of that, that I just hide. Like, I get too overwhelmed and I have to go into my little cage like a little turtle and be like, for years, I was really scared to come back to Melbourne after separating because of the amount of things that were said about me that weren't true. And I'm trying not to cry here. I've got some tissues just in
Yeah.
case. And it was very challenging because I knew what was being said and I could feel what was being said, but none of it was true. But I didn't feel the need to tell my story. I just wanted to really work on myself and work on my son. And that was my only task, is to look after us as human beings. But it is a trauma response. It
Yeah.
is a trauma response to go through. And there's a lot of gaslighting and manipulation. And if you can talk on that, would be great. Because I didn't even know what these words were many years ago until I started doing all of this work on myself. I had no idea. I was like, I just don't get it. I believed in a world of rainbows and butterflies. And I think that time in my life, which was needed, by the way, very needed, I needed to learn boundaries and needed to stand up for myself. And I needed to learn to say, no, that doesn't feel good. And I needed to say, that's not in the best interest of my child. But that has been taken from many people when I create a boundary, that I'm a bad person, that, oh no, she's bad. And it's like, well, no, I'm just trying to keep myself safe right now. I'm very understanding as a human. I've been through so much myself that I realize that even adults have adult tantrums. I'm a counselor for children and I've learned about mistakes and I've learned about it's very normalized and I've learned to have compassion for children, and that therefore means that I can have compassion for adults as well. But there's a time where I'll just say that's enough. That's enough. Like,
Yeah.
I am the nurturing person and I always play the masculine role in relationships, and I'm so just want to deeply be in my feminine. That's all I want, and it's really hard to get there. So can you talk a little bit about what is gaslighting and what is manipulation? Because this comes up in family dynamics, it comes up with friends, it comes back with families, all of these things. Like, what is an example of what gaslighting is? Because it's so common now.
Well, I want to thank you for continuing to share your personal journey. I'm very personally resonating with it as well myself. And I also want to celebrate your courageousness to maintain the agency and the empowerment you can in a very traumatic, dysregulating experience, because I think it's natural to want to get in, argue our case, over explain, get everyone to see exactly, what it is that who we really are. And the reality of it is, I think the safest thing that we can do for ourselves is exactly what you did. Create boundaries, create separation, find your way back to safety from a very real traumatic response, because we are social creatures. And even whether it's in the virtual world or in our social relationships, in our, in our communities, when we are feeling shamed, excelled, when there's smear campaigns against us and lies are being told, it is a trauma. It activates the very real centers of our brain, and it is a threat to our existence. And I think it's very natural to want to control it, stop it, correct it. And unfortunately, again, when people are committed to it, the safest and most difficult thing we could do is exactly as you very courageously and beautifully did, which is to say, let me focus on what I can control. Let me find my way back to my own safety and my own regulation to become someone and to show myself the compassion that I'm so readily giving other people, right? And to show myself and rebuild my own trust in me. Because what gaslighting is and manipulation is, it destabilizes us at our core. Right, gaslighting are those moments where I think it's actually built from a movie where, if I understand correctly, it's a term where this movie, and I'm gonna simplify and I might even be inaccurate, but it was, I think, a husband and a wife, and I don't know which partner it was, but would do things in the home, like change things, create experiences, and then outright deny. Say, "That never happened. That's not going on right now. You're crazy. I didn't do that." And that's gaslighting. And so this now term that's very widely thrown around in our social world is exactly that. It's those moments where we're sharing our experience of something, maybe even factually, "Hey, you said this," and someone saying, "No, I didn't. I never said that," or it's not that big of a deal, minimizing our experience or outright denying it. And then manipulation, right? It doesn't even have to be direct manipulation, but indirect, right? All of this ways in which we're being painted, context is being changed, framed a certain way. Maybe even our behavior is being manipulated. Someone is cueing into, right? The things that will get compel us to action, whether it's guilting us and then they begin to guilt us into an action that they want us to take or embody that would benefit them. And these are really subtle dynamics that the more consistently they happen, and often they begin in a childhood where our reality was denied. There wasn't space for it. We were made to be crazy because we were the truth speaker who said, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing or what I'm experiencing." And we were told, "No, it's not," or manipulated as I was. My mom wasn't a terrible person, but she knew how to manipulate me by saying, "Oh, please don't do this or I'll be sad," or "Please do this to make me happy." All of those are very subtle. "What am I, a terrible mother? You'll miss me when I'm gone." Looks, right? There can be a glare that goes along with now it's called the narc glare, right? Where there's just a look that you get and you know what's gonna come after that look, which is either an eruption, yelling, or a disconnection, the silent treatment like I used to get. All of those are subtle manipulations of behavior, right? Because you get that look long enough, consistently enough, and now all you need is that look or fear of that look, and you're gonna stop doing the thing. In my family, the language often was whenever one of myself or my siblings would speak, share our opinion, our feeling, have an emotion in the moment, we were always told that we were quote unquote "mouthing off," right? And that was something that was negative to be avoided. If it was
Yeah,
my brother and
disrespectful.
sister,
Mm,
disrespect, they might have been hit. I just came to be told from my sister that every now and again my mom would hit her. For me, it would be the look. If I was mouthing off, I would get the look, and then I wouldn't get spoken to for sometimes hours, sometimes days. At the worst, it was a couple months when I was 19 years old. All of these are very subtle ways that behavior is shaped. Again, it begins in childhood. What it leads to is an erosion of self-trust, where over time we begin to doubt our own reality, our own instincts, our own version of events, or our own emotions entirely. And they can again create these dynamics, this lack of trust in ourself, which it is, right? While again, we might be on the receiving end of someone gaslighting us, smear campaigning us, and it's so natural because of course their behavior is harming us. In my opinion and lived experience, the more empowered responsible stance to take is, yes, and I continue to let them in my life by not having a boundary. I don't separate. I don't, like you beautifully did, find myself to safety in the way I need to. I'm allowing it to continue. While again, in childhood, we did not have control. We could not
mm.
leave the family, stand up to the parent who did this. We've now learned to doubt ourselves. It is in creating the responsibility, the empowerment to create the separation, to feel ourself back into self-trust and our own instincts through boundaries that we can rebuild the impact of what once happened to us.
That is so impactful. And I think that will help so many people because people are just trying to keep themselves safe. It's not about you. It's not about you. I was in a relationship once and when we separated, I said, "Hey, we've never sat down and talked about it. Can you just tell me what you think is wrong with the relationship?" And it was everything that was wrong with me. And I was like, "Okay, can we talk about that? Oh, the fact that you didn't know that means that you haven't changed at all." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's harsh to hear, but that's okay." And I've just learned that everyone's on their own journey. Everyone is on their own journey. And I want to talk about the word narcissism. In my personal opinion, I think that it's thrown out like lollies now. You're a narcissist. You're a narcissist. Everyone's a narcissist. And I agree. Most of us do have narcissism in them. Absolutely. But because with the implementation of AI and things like ChatGPT, which is becoming people's personal counselor, do you think that the word narcissism, people have learned about what these words mean, which is great, fantastic. We've learned more about situations, but ChatGPT, their whole existence is to agree with you and make you the right and them the wrong. What I find is that if you use these tools to work on yourself and realize what you're doing wrong in the situations and being able to take accountability, that can have some real strength. But if you are like going to these chat GPT and AI, Claude, etc., if you are going to them and saying, can you make the other person wrong? That is just so detrimental, because most people are like, chat GPT told me that I was right and you're wrong. And oh, it's just a mess right now. I know that you've been open about the word narcissism publicly, but what are your thoughts around that?
I think, again, we all can shift into those self-protected states where our opinion, our needs, our wants, our emotions are the only thing that matters, and again, we'll do that when we are feeling threatened, overwhelmed, dysregulated. And I also think to some extent it is helpful, especially if we've never had safety and security or anyone who's seen our side and agreed with us or allowed us to develop the trust of what our reality is or even have the space to explore what our reality is, that experience can be helpful, whether it's a supportive friend who reflects back how terrible this person was that hurt me, right? That's part of the journey is like, I was hurt, making room for my hurt, my anger, whatever it is, whether it's with my parents, my current relationships, right? That's part of the story. We have to matter, right? Our experience is a role or needs to factor in. So some of us now find that on AI, others find it in a therapy room, right? Where the therapist only has your version of events oftentimes to agree with. And it can be very healing to be seen in that way, even if it's not necessarily the reality of what is happening. But we do then limit ourselves in perspective, right? In impact, in someone else's experience of us. If we're only relying on our reality, our emotions, our needs at any given moment. If we don't have someone, a well-meaning loved one, or develop the ability in ourselves to regulate enough to hear someone else's perspective, to hear and take accountability maybe for the impact that our action or inaction had on someone else. Even if we don't agree, right? Again, life is lived subjectively. We might not have meant to do or agree that you should feel the way you do, but it would really benefit the relationship to make space to hear how someone experienced us, what their perspective is, and how it felt for them, right? No one needs to be right or wrong. But again, when we are overwhelmed or in a trauma response, we make everything right and wrong, good and bad. We want to be on the right and good side of things, and you're on the bad, right? So until we, going back to this whole kind of concept of even with narcissism, especially, we need to learn to regulate our body, or else we're never going to be able to care about another person's opinion or to let it in. When I do use AI on the moments that I do, I will prompt it to say, give me all feedback, non-biased, call into question what it is that I am offering here. I want to see, and again, we're still learning AI and if it's even capable of doing that, but right, that is an attempt at similar to with those closest to me in my life that I trust. Sometimes I hate what their opinion is. I hate how their perspective is. I don't want to hear it. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to hear that I've hurt them. But that could be the greatest thing that I allow myself to work through that discomfort and say, "Okay, I don't agree. I wish you didn't feel this way. I'm hearing that you're disappointed in me or that my action hurt you in this moment, and I care about you. So I wanna learn how to." This goes back to, right, being the overachiever who only wants to excel even in my partnerships. I don't wanna that will land as criticism. I know it's not about me. I know it's my partner wanting to get closer to me by having a part in our relationship, but in those moments where I'm dysregulated, I don't wanna hear it. So until I come to calm, same thing with narcissism. Again, we're always gonna go into that self-focused state when we're dysregulated, which is why it's so foundationally important to build the capacity in our body so that we can work through the discomfort of hearing someone else's opinion so that we can actually be in collaborative mutual relationships, not ones that are just about us where we have to tear someone down if they don't agree with us.
Why do people find it so hard to take accountability?
I think it again, this is something that not a lot of us had modeled. A lot of people in general struggle to take accountability. It is uncomfortable, right, to hear how it is that maybe we have impacted another person. And I think another common reason is so very few of us feel empowered. We feel powerless, right? We don't actually feel like we're have agency or impacting the world around us. If we're locked and loaded on autopilot, right, where we are literally live in a reactionary state, if we've heard again that lack of accountability language in childhood where you made me do this, and if you didn't do this, I wouldn't have had to scream or yell, right? Now we're in a very dysregulated reactive state all the time. We're adopting that same language. We feel powerless. We feel like the world is happening to us. And I think the reality of our lived experience is we have not yet created the agency in our life, right? So accountability, it's why would I be accountable? I'm not playing a role. The world is happening to me. So we have to unlearn that conditioning, not only in like belief and the language in which we talk to ourselves and other people, but in our body to be able to feel like we can have agency to make impact or to be accountable to anyone.
In my past relationships, I have been very reactive at times, and lots of things have come up for me. And I've learnt through my child, actually, and being really accountable to him. I've learnt accountability, and I've learnt to say, oh, wow, that wasn't great. Like my red beast came out. Oh, that wasn't a good reaction. Hey, I'm sorry. Can I have another go at that? And I've learnt to be accountable. And through my co parenting relationship, I've learnt not to be reactive. Take a couple of days, sit on it, go to the beach, go surfing, do all of the things that you need to. And I've learnt that, and it has not been an easy process. I have had to destroy parts of my ego that existed and were like, no, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. Now we're running out of time, but I want to talk about limerence because I saw that on your Instagram and I was like, whoa, I didn't even know what limerence was, and I do that all the time. So can you talk to me about limerence, because I think that that is so important for the journey of us human beings.
Yeah, so limerence is again a kind of state dynamic, so to speak, in so many ways that originates in childhood, where, again, in a very protective manner, we tend to see things in very black and white in a very idealized way. Again, beginning with our parents, where in childhood, independency, not being able to even maturely understand that humans are complex. They have good parts, they have more difficult parts to be with. It's safer in childhood for us to make things all good, all bad, and especially our parents often land in the category of all good because we can't change them, right? It's so hard to acknowledge that we have parents limited by whatever information capacity of their own. So the most adaptive thing in childhood to do is actually to take on the responsibility and make ourselves bad or wrong and adapt to our very good parents, even if, of course, they're not acting good in any way. And again, this sets again in a dynamic of attachment, of connection, as we talked about earlier, where we learn then to seek certain types of partners, certain patterns, and even certain feelings in relationship. Now, again, this could live in our internal world, and in childhood, it often begins in our imaginative world where we imagine, right, how great our parents are. Or maybe if our parents aren't so good, we imagine this great family, this made up family, this
I
TV
do that all the
family
time.
that we're going to save us from the discomfort that we're experiencing. So again, like everything we've been talking about today, it's a protective pattern. It's too uncomfortable to be with the reality of an imperfect parent and all the pain that they're causing me. So I'm living in the imagination that they're so great and this perfect person that I can't acknowledge any of their faults. And of course, some of us carry this tendency through adulthood. Or I'm living in the imaginary world of greatness that doesn't map onto the reality, all out of protection. And then again, because as we explored earlier, all of these survival driven patterns drive our attachment styles, we tend to seek the familiar and we see the same then patterns. We repeat them in adulthood. We fall hard, we fall quick. They're perfect. I'm marrying them after 3 dates. They can't do any wrong. I'm addicted to the dopamine and the high and the oxytocin of this early connections. And then we're missing red flags. We're ignoring things. We're explaining them away. We're chasing the next high by keeping them happy, by appeasing them, by doing by suppressing and avoiding our actual emotions, right? All of the things that we've learned create and maintain those attachments that at one time we needed. And again, like all of these patterns, our body hasn't updated. They continue to repeat, whether it's in the internal world, where as adults we're still imagining things that aren't mapping onto the reality, or in the relational patterns that we repeat. And we know, right, these highs and lows that we call passion in a relationship are often not only driven by our attachment patterns and the familiarity of them, but by actual chemicals in our body where we are seeking these highs and lows and keeping ourselves stuck then in this kind of limerence, always seeking the same feeling again out of protection and or familiarity well into our adulthood.
You know why I struggle with this? Because I'm very intuitive and I can feel things. I can feel things that other people can't feel. I can feel people. I'll feel them, then they'll call me. I have a very strong intuition and I can feel things, but then in the reality, it's not coming to fruition. And I get really confused about this sometimes. I'm like, that I know that person's thinking or whatever, but why are you not calling me? I just get very confused. Like, where do we draw the line between trusting our intuition and the reality of what's going on?
So again, this is kind of wrapping everything that we've been talking about. Intuition is right, connecting to our internal signal senses. I do believe that we have far greater, we don't just have the five senses that we've been told, right? Sight, sound, taste, and all those good things. I do think we have energetic sensitivity. We have these intuitive moments where we can know what's happening. And they've studied this actually, and often in parent and child relationships where mothers often will have an instinct that something is, they'll have a racing heart and a sick feeling in their stomach, and they'll get a call that their child was in a car accident. It's like they have that, we have that ability. I mean, call it telepathy, all the different ways and instincts where we can tune into other senses. And intuition, right, in the most practical sense, whether or not you believe in the woo woo that I just went down, but intuition is just simply connecting to our own feelings, instincts, emotions. All of those are signals, right? When our heart races and we tense up, chances are we're responding to a lack of safety in our current environment, assuming a couple things that our sensory system is accurate, that we're not hypersensitive or perceiving threats, as now science has verified we will do if we have trauma, especially in our earliest attachment relationships, if we have complex trauma. They've done incredible studies where you will misinterpret neutral stimulation, right? See an angry face in a neutral one. Again, all of these patterns can be passed through generations who lived in trauma, whether it was war, financial insecurity, abuse, right? We can be born with these more inaccurate, hyper in tuned, hypersensitive nervous systems, though with safety, with security, right? Our instincts are there for a reason. We feel fear when we need to be on alert because something is possibly threatening. We feel anger when our boundaries are being violated or our needs are going unmet. So again, tying all this together, if we didn't have the space, the safety, the security to tune in, to be curious, to trust, if we were gaslit in childhood, we're not going to be able to even tune into or sense our intuition or trust it. Right, so again, even if when we develop that ability to be safe and secure and understand our own signals, that doesn't mean that other people are gonna show up in alignment with the signals that they're sending to us, right? Because everyone else is living from their own trauma, their own dysregulation, right? They might wanna call you, but get in their own way for whatever reason because they're afraid that you're gonna reject them, just to use that silly example. Right, so again, the journey is reconnecting with ourself, developing such a trust in our own intuition that we can hear what we're saying, believe what we're saying, and act on that even if and when, right, the world isn't reflecting back what we instinctually know to be true.
That's so powerful in itself. All my situations that have happened in life, I'm so grateful for them because it has helped me to trust myself. And you also put something on your Instagram about when we learn to be alone, that's us healing. And I don't really want to spend time with that many people anymore. I want to spend time with myself. And I always thought that was an avoidance. And I'm realizing that's just me learning how to create safety within me. Now, Reparenting the Inner Child is your book. It is phenomenal. There is so many little activities and things for people to do to be able to really just connect back into themselves, which is the most important thing that we can do as human beings, is really connect back into who we are as humans. And Nicole, you are absolutely amazing. You are fantastic. You have helped me beyond. You have helped millions of people all around the world. Now, please tell us where we can find you, about your courses and things that people can do. And yeah, it's just, please tell us about you.
Thank you so much. This has truly been an honor. I really appreciate your support of my new book and kind words about it. I really did put in there not only all of this information so that we can gain a more compassionate awareness of why and where we remain stuck, but also the practical tools to create the change that all of us deserve. So, for the new book and really all of the past three, four books I now have, anywhere books are sold, they are all also on Kindle or Audible. So, depending on how you like to consume your book content, though also don't hesitate to follow me on any and all of the social media. I'm across all of the platforms now, some version of the holistic psychologist. We're having these conversations. We're talking about these tools each and every day. So even if you don't spend a dime on the book, though I appreciate when you do, it helps me continue to write books. Please do become a part of this conversation and connect with the other individuals that are quite literally from around the world healing. And then finally, the virtual membership Self Healer Circle. Super excited in honor of this conversation. Next month, we'll be covering covert narcissism. Every month, I release a new topic. There's workshops, there's workbooks, there's meditations, and there's a beautiful community from literally, again, around the world that are all joining together to take healing into their own hands. And you can get more information on that at selfhealercircle.com.
And I can confirm that your work is beyond. It is incredible. It goes deep, deep into ourselves. And I think that's what people need. So Dr. Nicole LePera, the holistic psychologist, thank you so much for being here. And I could talk to you for 2 hours. I still have 20 other questions that we didn't get through today, but I just want to honor you. I want to appreciate you and thank you for speaking out. It's never easy, especially when it comes to our family. I've spent my adult life dealing with my childhood, and that's why I work with children now. I have a business called Happy Souls Kids, where we leverage the influence of athletes to teach kids the art of mindfulness and self-regulation. And if I can teach children the lessons that I've learned as an adult, that's going to help their journey, and that's what we're doing now. So if you like this podcast, please subscribe, please like it, and go over to the holistic psychologist. She's incredible. She is beyond amazing at really helping us connect back to ourselves, because that's the journey that we're on. It's not about who's the fault, who's the problem, who's this. It's us. We need to come back to us and work on us, because if we're triggered by something, we didn't even get to what a trigger is today, but if we're triggered by somebody's behavior, it's because something is coming up in us. So once you're triggered, do the inner work, and Dr. Nicole is somebody that you should really connect with. Thanks for being on Raw with Jay.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing to support our future generations and children, and for allowing me to connect with both you and your community. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks for being here. If you're a parent, carer, or somebody walking alongside children in this wild world, come visit us at Happy Souls Kids, a platform we created to give kids the tools that we never had and offer parents the support that we've so often had to figure out alone. Can you imagine kids had the tools that we now have as adults? That's the work that we do. Until next time, keep showing up, keep feeling deeply, and keep finding your way home to yourself. Love, light, and gratitude, Jay.